I've got another breaking story I want to talk to you about, and this is one we'd been planning to cover even before this broke, and that's the case of Bryan Kohberger, a man accused of killing the 4 Idaho college students. Tonight, prosecutors challenging Kohberger's request to throw out the entire grand jury indictment. This is both sides prepare to face off in court tomorrow. Now, Kohberger's attorneys argued the grand jury indictment should be thrown out because basically the grand jurors were misled, that a higher standard of proof should have been used to determine whether criminal charges should move forward. But in this new motion filed in the past couple of hours, prosecutors say that argument, quote, rests entirely on an erroneous legal theory. They said to suggest some errors in the grand jury process necessitate dismissal of the indictment without any inquiry into the potential prejudicial effect cannot be squared with Idaho Supreme Court precedent, and that in fact any error in the grand jury proceeding is harmless once the defendant has been afforded a fair trial. This all comes ahead of tomorrow's hearing where the judge is expected to rule on the defense motions to dismiss the case, to set a schedule. Kohberger offered his alibi earlier this month, claiming he was going for a routine drive when the killings took place, didn't give specifics. He faces 4 counts of first-degree murder in the stabbing deaths of Madison Mogen, Kaylee Gonsalves, Xander Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. If convicted, Kohberger could face death by firing a squad because of a recent change in Idaho state law. Tomorrow's hearing is a big deal.
I can't stress it enough. It's going to dictate when the trial happens, if the indictment gets thrown out, and how the defense is going to defend themselves. So I don't know where you want to start. If you want to
Let's start with the defense.
Let's start with the defense. Their main goal, let's just try to throw out the grand jury indictment. You and I talked about it, talked about the standard of proof. The prosecution responded very strongly. So since you and I talked, I looked at Idaho law, and there seemed to be confusion about what is the standard of proof by which a grand jury has to come back. Prosecution said whatever ambiguity there is, you look at the Supreme Court, and they have been consistent, it is probable cause.
They're going to lose. The defense is going to lose.
Okay, so put that to the side. The defense has a stronger argument that they say the prosecution has to turn over to them evidence regarding genetic genealogy. The most important piece of evidence in this case is that DNA linking him to the crime scene. They say, we want to know how you came to this. Who else did you identify? What were the methods that you used? We have a right. This is part of the discovery process. Now, what's the prosecution saying? Well, wait a second. You don't have a right to know if we looked at John Smith or what other names came up. It's going to, hurt the integrity of investigative methods. You don't have a right to it. Now, what do I think is going to happen? The judge is going to go somewhere in the middle, because this is a right for the defendant to defend himself and try to say genetic genealogy, as strong as it is, we have a right to poke holes in it. But to go into so strong that the defense has a right to say who else was identified and what were the methods that investigators used, I don't think the judge is going to allow that.
The defense has also added another DNA person to the team.
So they've added a DNA expert. That is probably going to counter the prosecution's expert. I mentioned DNA before in the other case. As strong as genetic genealogy is, and we've seen it solve a ton of cold cases, there are holes in it. It's when you take something like 23andMe versus a lab-conducted test, it's not always the same, and they're going to fight that, and they have to, because again, it was first his father's DNA that was matched.
Right.
And then once they got him, they took his own DNA, and it was a statistical match, so they have to fight it. Now, if the judge, let's say, says, you don't have a right to any of this, then that is going to impede the defense in a major way. I don't know how they're going to defend themselves.
What are we talking about in terms of timing? Are they going to be setting any schedules?
Yes. So this trial is set tentatively for October. His defense team is trying to stay it, basically pause it. I don't think this trial is happening in less than 2 months, okay? This is a death penalty case. There's a lot they have to go through. Is it so shocking to think this might get pushed out to 2024? I don't think so. And so there's a part of it where it's ultimately going to be up to Bryan Kohberger. If he says to his attorneys, listen, I said a speedy trial, I want this to go to trial, it's his choice. But his attorneys right now are saying, we want to pause to this. We want to review the grand jury. We want to see if there were any problems in the grand jury process. They noted that. They said that there was problems in the grand jury, the way that they filled out the questionnaires. They said that there was problems in the way that certain statements were made in front of the grand jury. So they want to pause in it. But look, it's going to be up to him if he says he wants to take the trial.
If the defense had a stronger case, I would think they might want to rush this to trial. I think right now time is on their side. They want to try and find any potential flaws, mistakes, etc.
You don't believe the I was just driving around in the middle of the night defense? Because that's what his alibi is right now.
That's not an alibi,
Yeah,
right?
I know.
An alibi means you actually have some sort of proof you were somewhere else. I guess you could call it an alibi, but an alibi typically says, oh,
yeah,
I was at the store, and I've got a receipt that I was at the store. And I was driving around by myself isn't much of an alibi. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.